The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Nerc, generated approximately 938.5 million naira from fees collected from importers of generators and other internal revenue sources. This period was from June 2020 to June 2021, according to data provided by the industry regulator and seen by This Day newspaper. Nerc had in 2013 introduced a 25,000 naira charge per unit of 100 kVA generators imported into the country in its guidelines for obtaining clearance certificates for the importation of generating sets and related matters. Joining us to discuss further, we have in our Lagos studio, Arise business analyst Chika Mbonu. He's back in the new year. Chika, Happy New Year.
Today? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So, and then also in our Abuja studios, Dr. Sam Amadi, former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. He's also an Arise analyst. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Amadi. Good morning to you and Happy New Year. So I do want to start with you, Dr. Amadi. Look, I want to ask you what you make of this development, and from one administration to the other, this challenge of power. I want to start with you first.
Well, clearly, I mean, the issue of the revenue, it looks like a windfall, but really, NEC had established these charges as for two purposes. One was first to maintain some kind of technical control over the quality of generators. Again, people always think that there's some relationship between generator importation and lack of power, but really there is no such organized sabotage by the importers. But clearly, NEC did this as a form of partly self-serving to extend its regulatory ambit, but also as well as to be able to create some technical oversight of that, growing sector. Now, back to the crisis of power supply. Clearly, yes, from one regime to another, primarily, 2 points. One is that the new government did not suspend the reform as it were, even if they probably kind of de-emphasize some aspect of it. So in a sense, one can argue that this is the same policy being implemented, but with varying effectiveness and different kinds of leadership in terms of quality. The second point is that some people argue in support of what's going on that, look, we need just some periods, let's say about 10 years, you can see maybe more significant improvement because the policies, the change from public ownership to private ownership needs some kind of husbanding, some care, nurture, and over time maybe we could see more significant and structured, coherent development. But again, on the back side of it is that it seems like we got some things wrong, and I've argued that maybe both in terms of the design, the structure, and the timing and phasing in of the reform, particularly privatization, may have come at a point when we didn't build sufficient corporate practice, sufficient corporate governance structure, and regulatory capability in a way that we maybe naively hope that mere transfer of ownership will be able to solve the problem. We see from the British example that the results of privatization, even over a longer period of time, with a much more stronger economy, greater regulatory capability, didn't quite produce the kind of results that we think or we believed that privatization by itself would have done. We probably did not corporatize enough, commercialize enough, and carry out some other public sector reform that are very supplementary and ancillary to the changes in the market ownership that would have probably given us results. So basically, we need to go back and see where we dropped the ball, where we didn't get it right, and what could be done to ensure that we get a much more significant improvement down the line.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Madi. Chika, your thoughts, please.
Doctor, good morning. I see that your former department is profiting from the agony of Nigerians. This double jeopardy. You're not providing us power, and then they were providing power by ourselves, and then you are flogging us for that. I read a report by somebody, I think called Ayo, I think it was a commissioner, and he said that whereas Nigerians produce about 40,000 megawatts of power, from the grid gives Nigerians about 4,000. So it's about the ratio of 1 to 10. And the cost is about, the differential about 40 naira per kilowatt hour. And so Nigerians, based on that report, are spending about 12 trillion every year on self-supplied power, bigger than the national budget. And I've said it several times in this program. If you need to just go to some of these malls, you see where all the generators are tied together with the chain, and everybody knows his own. I'm sure our viewers have seen some of these pictures where they are littered all over the place. And I hope people are collecting the right revenues, because these generators are more than these revenues you have collected. Now, but talking about the power issues we have in our country, where do we start? The problems are plenty. If you look through the power value chain, everywhere has a problem. Now, but it's not strange. I've looked through some case studies of power privatization programs in third world, especially developing what's. And what happened in Nigeria is like what happened over there. At the first phase, you don't see the GE, the General Electrics, and the Siemens, and those power companies coming to bid for the assets. What you see is that, all the ex-military people who have power, all the political power blocks, think that is an opportunity to, make a grab for the national assets, and they share it among themselves. Meanwhile, we are looking for what? Competence. Those who have done it before. We're looking for those who have funding to run the power, run the assets after acquiring them. But these things have never happened in Nigeria. That's why we run into problems. So you have people who acquire these assets, and subsequently they don't have the wherewithal to be able to run the assets. And so if you go through the value chain, whether it's from the Gencos to NBET to transmission company to the discos, there's a problem at every phase. And 1 hour, 2 hours won't be enough for us to go through all those. But it seems, as we know in Nigeria, that we don't have too much problem with the generation. Generation has been trying, even though it's stagnated at the 4,000. I'm told our capacity to generate power is about 13,000 megawatts in a year. 13,000 megawatts. But the issue is, can we wheel all those power? By transmission company in Nigeria to the distribution companies, and that has been the major problem that we have, and the problems are plenty.
Thank you so much for that, Chika. Dr. Mali, before I get your response, I do want the both of you to please react to this. Since Chika was talking about the acquiring of those power assets and how well they've been handled. President Buhari, in one of the interviews he conducted recently, where he was asked about power, I want to get both of your responses to his response to that question. To
be fair to the president, I think he had some good intimation as to the problem, but of course, as usual, simplistic and, they don't quite get it right. Okay, first, people talk so much about those who bought the assets. I was a regulator. I didn't do transactions, but I can tell you that I worked closely with BPE, and they had road shows across the world. I participated in one in New York. Some of my colleagues were in Singapore. They were in some other part of the world, London. And the idea was to woo the international community, the investors community, to come to Nigeria. And then, don't forget, this is a competitive market. There are more stable electricity markets where investors can go. And so the Nigerian government had to make it, more attractive by lowering, for example, we optimize, reduce the asset valuation. And after the fairs, they didn't get good bids. And again, those who bought the assets, it wasn't like a sweetheart deal. It wasn't like corrupt deal. It was that the only people who could come at that point. I think the problem was, and Pete is right, that we probably shouldn't have sold in a hurry like we did. The shock therapy that we saw in East Europe and all that. Some of us argued for a much more restrained privatization because first, you didn't have, these assets had no creditworthiness, as it were. I did the first accounting for this sector since 1960 or 1950. NEPA didn't have a well-established account. We did that for the first time. We did a meter inquiry. So you are just building a corporate profile for these companies. And so it was really delusive to think that the big hitters, the GEs and all that, will come in as to buy them. They can only come in providing some kind of MOU that are not bankable, so to say. So in a sense, what we had is what we could get, which is smart Nigerian businessmen put up bids with support of maybe some got Asian firms to support them, and they made a bid. And again, there are some problems. First, you didn't have the initial proposition was that you're going to buy the asset with your money, and then you use debts to finance recovery and improvement. Now we saw a situation where almost everybody got this asset with 100% debts, borrowing from banks and other institutions. So that means that they didn't quite have the resources anymore or the capacity to borrow more. They over-borrowed. By the time they got the assets, they can't borrow to do the required improvement that would have perhaps helped us now to have some significant improvement in power supply. So 3 problems. One is that we were in a hurry to privatize it. So Brent is right to say something is wrong, but he got it wrong. It wasn't because there were no engineers. There's nothing. We have enough engineers both on the old NEPA and in the new discourse. What you didn't have was change management that was strategic, financing that was enough to invest in the long term, in the short term, and recover in the long term, which is how the electricity market works. So hot money, poor short tenor funding from banks that kind of supported by assets that the owners are in a hurry to recover means that the level of investment post acquisition is not going to be that much. Again, you are dealing with also structural crisis, government policy flip-flop, and lack of capacity in the public sector that supports the private sector acquisition. So some of this, we didn't de-risk the sector enough. We didn't build up commercialization and the corporate culture, which is what we are doing now. By the time we privatized in 2013, NEC, we came in 2010, built up the momentum, privatized, and 2014, 2015, we closed down on some of the regulations that are using now, and we exited. We had 2 years of no serious regulatory work before the president fully got a full complement of commissioners. So if you map all this, you can understand that first, the modeling was wrong. 2, project management strategies were probably insufficient and inadequate. Not matter of no engineers. Engineers don't buy assets. It's business people who buy the assets, get engineers, get economists, get all the human resources to drive change management. So the notion that this is an engineering problem is wrong. This is an adaptive challenge. It's not a technical challenge. Otherwise, we're having good engineers to just go and build a turbine. Forget about the financing. Forget about the management crisis. Forget about understanding the market and this evolution. Just build a turbine, get engineers to fix the boats, and then you run. So that's the simplistic, and that's wrong. But clearly, he's right. Something is wrong with the design. Something is wrong with the project implementation. And maybe the guys who bought these assets clearly, in fact, we shouldn't have sold all the assets. The World Bank told us that we're not going to be able to sell 11 discos in one fell swoop. When we did that, we were rejoicing. But they're right. The market is not deep enough to fund strong acquisition of 11 discos with investors who have the capacity. The capital market is not that deep enough. The money market is not deep enough. And so we scratched through, got these 11 discos sold, but sold to persons who were over-leveraged, who didn't have the enough balance sheet to justify the level of investment that they should make to drive down aggregate technical commercial losses, which are the base of getting this assets. So we need to be patient. We need to understand the problem. We need to go back to the planning and say, look, what can we retrofit? How can we, at the margin, tweak? We don't need to disrupt, but we need to tweak. We need to really use regulation now to deal with those modeling and project implementation problems. So the president is right in his intimation, in a sense, that something is wrong, but it's wrong in diagnosis and in characterizing it simply as lack of engineers and persons who had sweetheart deal. It was more complex than that.
Thank you, Dr. Chika. We've got a couple of minutes. I'll give you the last word.
I think I like your, Doctor, I appreciate your candor. I think you have summarized the issues, challenges we had in this privatization program. But let me add, what the president actually meant was that the people who bought these assets were not GE and Siemens. That's actually what he meant by saying they're not engineers. That's actually what he meant by that. The funding has been a major issue. The type of fund used in acquiring these assets has been a major issue. As he said, they were supposed to acquire the assets with their money and then borrow to, carry out the infrastructure, the development. The issue has been that these people went to the market, and then Nigerian people like short term. You need to be shocked to see the term sheets for some of this lending. Some of them were just very short term. But power lending is normally 10 years tenor. This is a very short tenor. And what happened then was that they had to run trip now because of the personal loans the loans are taken to buy this asset. When collections started coming from the discos, they had to run trip the money now to start paying off the banks instead of reinvesting to turn around the assets. I think the things you have mentioned are enough for us to use to turn around this privatization program and turn it to the right direction. We just need to go back. It's not the issue of taking back the assets from those who bought them, but to go back and look at where we're getting them wrong and make sure we provide the right support, which the couple of initiatives. One of the things that happened before was the fact was there were a lot of leakages in the collections, and the CBN came in and did an escrow funding and started collecting all the money from the discos, and that had enlarged liquidity in the system. Push back MBE to be paid on time and more. Push back the GENCOs to be paid on time and more, and there'll be more liquidity in the system. And then everybody has to work together now to provide the required resources to turn around the place. Thank God for the Siemens deal that has come on board, and we hope that will assist us in the power change in the country.
We'll leave it there. We could have so much more to talk about, as Chika said. We could go on for 2 hours on this topic. Arise business analyst Chika Mbonu here in Lagos. Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise analyst, also former Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission chairman in Abuja. Thank you both, gentlemen, for your insights on power. Big topic in Nigeria.